what Thoth is, obviously in the Kemetic tradition, is the father of languages, the father of basically rules, guidelines, structures, everything that you can think of as far as programming is needed in the matrix is actually embodied in an entity known as Thoth, that comes out as our word thought. And the reason for this is because there's only one thing that's different than knowing everything: thinking. What thinking is a literally admittance that you don't know. So what happens is that, let's say, for instance, if I go into the kitchen and I say, "Where's the napkins?" That means I don't know where the napkins are. I'm asking you. So this is the same thing as if you say, well, where do I come from, or who are my ancestors, or if you're even reading about your ancestors, you're admitting subconsciously that you don't know about your ancestors. So this is a cycle also that we can actually get caught up in, because we can already read everything that we need to know about the ancestors and confirm that we come from that lineage. But then there's still this disassociation where we don't actually begin to live like we're the ancestors. We still keep trying to find more books about the ancestors, keep trying to get more information about the ancestors. And what this literally is saying is, well, I don't really know the ancestors yet, so I still need to keep researching. So this product of thought is a big part of how the matrix that we're living in operates, because what thought does is it leaves a quest or a question in front of you. Now, of course, thoughts are very connected to questions. And then, of course, any time that a person has a thought, they always have a question. And what that question is generally termed as is actually the quest, the reason for our existence. So we start to run around the realm, basically, thinking about all the time why we really exist. We get sidetracked very easy to the bigger idea of why we exist, the bigger potential, and then we get lost in all the little sub-programs that are running in the matrix that attempt to just infuse more and more of an idea of the being that you're living at the being that you're living at here as now is the end-all, finish-all to who you are, and you're to do all the building and all the creating onto that character, which is also going to die. So then all that information, all that knowledge, and everything that you've learned will actually be useless. So this is the product that we're living in. So no wonder then why there's so much disruption in the reality. No wonder then why it's very difficult for a person to even gain their sea legs here, if you may, and actually get stable enough to actually create a structure and begin to create their own reality and even have time to do this. Because remember, even if you're on the phone right now and you're listening to this, this means some kind of extreme luxury has been bestowed on you. Because most of the people, still 90% of the world, doesn't actually have time to go through tearing down the cultural structure of their country. Now, let me explain that. See, of course, like let's say, for instance, when the United States was developed, they know that a fundamental part of culture, is beyond the games, is to have a religion or a structure, right? A religious structure, a belief system, a higher power. And, of course, they've learned that from all the other cultures that exist. So, of course, that's how Christianity was created. It was created as a hodgepodge of predominantly Brahmic traditions. That's who Abraham is. He's a Brahm. His wife, Sarah, who's Saraswati. And Kemetan traditions when it comes to the New Testament about Horus and his mother. So we already know that now. That is all out of the bag. But we have to realize a key thing that happened, which was, of course, that the God did not come out black. The God came out white. And there's a reason for this, because how can slaves worship a God that looks like them and still believe that they're supposed to be less than the man that's mastering over them? It wouldn't make any sense. So the whole slavery thing wouldn't even work. But even deeper, if we look into it, the Greek culture did the same thing. They stylized, in fact, all of their entire pantheon off of the Kemetan pantheon, but they weren't going to bring in the black gods because they're Greeks. So they brought in Greek gods. So what I'm trying to get people to see here is that in every culture, whether you want to say it's right or wrong, it is, a person will take the most popular spiritual story, which is actually written in nature, and then they'll stylize it in the version of their culture, in the color of their people, and that's how you have to introduce into a program a spiritual structure. You see, so this is called this is the building in a reality. So if you're in a reality and that's happened to you, and then you're sitting in someone else's culture, someone else's tradition, you would have to come snap to it right away and realize, well, of course, they wouldn't have stylized the God as the same color as me if I wasn't supposed to be the central character in the theme. So then this really makes it common sense for you to go back and to research, well, where did I really start from? Not where did everything else start from. Let me go ahead and track down. This is what then is called, let me track down the code to the matrix. Meaning, let me track down how this thing is constructed and what program is being used. Because when I know that, I will be able to control my reality. Now, some people say, I'll be able to control the entire reality, as in they'll go into this megalomania. Now I'll be able to get my enemies back and all this kind of, get my crown back, and then they're going to die. I'm going to obliterate them. I'm going to smoke them. I'm going to give them gas to drink and lava and, exact retribution upon their face. And all of this, and all of that actually is created within the glitches in our own mind. Now, let me explain what the glitches are now. Of course, we all have our own programming zone. But see, what happens is when there's a solid program, which Earth is, Gaia, Ma'at, etc., is a solid program. It's known as an anchor in the chasm. It actually they call it the rock. And this means that in the realm of chaos and nothingness, which is the subjective plane, there's this stable point that we're actually calling Earth, or this reality, and it can host your projections. It can give you a moment and slow down all the frequencies for you so that you have an opportunity to do what we call grow, build, create your own thing. So what Earth, again, is Earth has a code within it that if we learn it, then we understand everything about how to create physical realities around us. And then what it also gives you the power to do is gives you the power to begin to build your world in the dream. Like basically every time that you go to sleep, you go right back to the same world that you left off last time you woke up and at the same point that you left off, and then you're able to keep building that world. And then when you leave here, because there's no such thing as time, so you'll leave right on time. As soon as your world is completely built, you'll go slide right into that world. Now, the reason why that I bring this up is because most people in their dreams, the dream is actually a broken program. It's a glitching program. And what I mean by that is there's integers inside of that dream that don't make sense, like you dying in the dream, like you getting hurt in the dream, or water on the ceiling in the dream. Basically, certain mechanics in the dream that don't make it work, allow it to glitch. And so a good idea of a glitch and why this matrix that we're living in has been fully tried and tested is actually if a person came into this realm flying. This is how you'll know that this entire code has already been tried and tested. There's nothing new under the sun. If one person comes here flying, it's going to change the reality for everyone here. People are going to want to figure out how they can fly. I mean, there's going to be a lot of stuff to be dealing with, just with something as simple as someone flying. Now, of course, some people fly in the dream all the time. Fly in the dream. That's generally how I get to where I need to go. I just go and fly there. So what I'm saying to you is that in this reality, this code has already been tested to cause the least amount of anomalies as possible. So bringing in your supreme being into this realm, like some people just want to shine literally in the dimension, is so difficult because the code and the programming that has been done in this matrix and on top of the matrix has actually been designed for these anomalies not to occur. And then that way we don't get glitches, like meaning other people decide that, okay, well, I'm going to fly too. So how's that going to work out for traffic laws? How's that going to work out for insurance? How's that going to work out for the economy? You see, so this is what I mean by programming because, see, we'll have Ma'at sitting there. That's the core mainframe, the core database, if you may. And then someone else, a hacker, if you may, and this is the culture vultures, will come and start taking knowledge from the mainframe, which is what the Royal Society has done. They've actually, from radiolaria to geometry to the physics to true Ma'at, the mathematics, being able to formulate problems in codes that if someone could solve that problem, they just need to understand the code. Because this is what math actually is. It's like, let's say there's bigger problems. So of course, you got your problems. You're like, okay, well, I need some more cash. Maybe that's your problem, right? So the bigger issue will actually be seen in the star systems, let's say, and it'll be seen in the orbit of a star. So you may notice there's an orbit of a star that's around your main entry point that's lagging a little bit off. So at that point, you can determine from that, and this is what the ancients were doing, you could determine from that all the problems that you're experiencing is from that star lagging. right? So then what you would do is you would start coming up with a formula, a mathematical formula of how to get that star back in line and back in orbit, basically back in its correct orbit. You would develop a formula. Now, this would be a problem for you. Notice how they call it a mathematical problem. This will be a problem for you until you fix it. So if you wanted to present that problem to the elders to have them work on it, or maybe some prodigy in the tribe and have him or her work on it, you would need to at least write that down. And so you would write it down in the language known as math or ma'at. And it would sit there until some genius came along and looked at it and said, hey, actually, look, the solution to this problem is E equals MC squared. Now, this, of course, comes across to us like that. But when it comes across now to the Royal Society and the ones who want to run this sub-program that is going on right now, which I call the fake matrix, is when one of our intelligent beings, which you see a lot of them come out of India, a lot of them come out of anywhere, when our intelligent beings take those mathematical equations that they presented in that occult language. Math is an occult language. When you get into trigonometry physics, you know it's occult because you don't understand it. You're looking at the squiggly line and like, yo, that is not for me. So what happens is that when someone knows how to read that occult code and then answer the problem that is presented in that occult code, now this is what happens. That person says, oh, shoot, I solved the problem. They say, you sure did. And they pat him on the back, and they may even give him a Nobel Peace Prize. Now, but he doesn't know what he solved. And what he's actually solved is a much more massive thing that's going on, maybe with the parallax of a star, that may take them out of power. You see what I mean? So this means that when you have a system that is subdivided in its languages, it often has the citizens that are inside of that system doing things that are actually only benefiting the hackers of the system by allowing our knowledge, our power, and our energy, our ancestry, etc., to be harnessed to allow their dreams and prosperity and visions and futures to become reality. So what this would be like then, because if you realize what just went on, now there was some knowledge that, just kind of came out for a moment, and then nobody knew how to take it because they've been in so much judgment. Meaning that sometimes when, let's say, a quote-unquote a white person comes with some knowledge to, let's say, a melanin-dominant person, he don't know what he's talking about, and then just completely blow by. And the truth is that there's no such thing as colors. So this one guy, he starts coming into this knowledge from the government about this stuff called black goo. Okay, and what black goo is supposed to be is this sentient, basically, blob of black darkest nothingness that they've been playing around with in the military-industrial complex, and it's been giving them knowledge about all sorts of stuff from space and time travel, but also it's extremely hostile and it has its own attitude. And they say that they pulled this stuff from the depths of the ocean. So if you understand the pressure that's down in the bottom of the ocean and the kind of minerals and meteorites that have been formulated in there, you can only imagine what this stuff is. But I started to realize that I knew exactly what it was, that it was actually what they would refer to as Ma'at, or the darkest darkness. Now, the reason why it's important to bring this up is because it was then found out when you look at the temples of Edfu, that you're actually dealing with an entirely, basically a large construction of a CPU, a central processing unit that is probably running a quantum mainframe. And so what I'm saying is that the same patterns that you see in your computers right now when you open up your computer is the same thing that the temples that you see in Egypt are actually constructed as, that they're basically these large mainframes. And where this black cube or black goo comes from is the same element that we use in our computers today, which is silicon, which silicon is a high relationship to carbon. So we're carbon-based life forms, and they're silicon. And on the periodic table, they're right next to each other because that means that there's some similarities between these two elements. So higher levels of knowledge just means like laws of light. You know how you master over the fire beings is with laws of light. What laws of light are is like what's on the periodic table. It's like, well, the carbon-based life forms are very close to the silicone-based life forms. They have like a relationship. This is like a Royal Society conversation. So all we have to do is we just need to create some kind of elements that are full of silicon, and then they'll just love those elements, and they'll have them all around them. They'll be so close to them all the time. All right, we're going to set out and develop something, and then that'll become your computer. That'll become your cell phone. And now, right now, you don't see too many people without a computer or a cell phone. It is almost stuck to them. And even more than that, silicons are also silicates, and this gives us silicone. And obviously, we've seen enough of the advent of silicone into the woman's body at this point. Like, instead of it just being even next to her in her hand, it's inside of her body. But see, that relationship is a law of light. It's actually a chemical procedure that goes on between the elements that are within our body. So when someone knows that, what I'm saying is when someone knows those codes, it's easy to create things that you fall after and that you feel like is what you need, because it has inside of it elements that are directly connected to you. So then when we turn around and we start looking at this knowledge, we start realizing that, well, wait a minute, there is, again, nothing new here. Even the most advanced technologies are actually plagiarized from the ancient cultures. And not only that, there were vast mainframes, and they still exist now because time is linear as we're looking at it, but non-linear on the true realm that things exist. So this means that the height of Kemet is still going on. It's just whether can you get there or not. And then the height of any civilization is still going on. It's a matter of whether you can get there or not. So getting there, just to allow you to see, well, what was one way of how people used to get there? It was sound. And this is what mantras were. This is why you would have a language, is that there are certain sounds, like, so you know how people do chants, obviously. If you go into the Eastern traditions, you see that they're chanting all the time. What they're literally doing is they're creating a bridge through time. Because when hundreds of years someone has been chanting the same thing, and then you come across and you start chanting it, when you change your vibratory frequency, which happens generally after about 3 hours of chanting something, when you change your vibratory frequency to be harmonic with that, you literally are calling the phone number of that timeline. And then once someone picks up, meaning you get on that stream, you now actually open up a line of communication between where you are and the entire string of time that name, word, vibration is being mentioned. So this is, again, the importance of actually having, and I'm not saying, if you don't have it, you're doomed, but you already know it, the importance of having the ancient code and knowing the ancient code and being connected to the ancient code, because it's always going to be for you an anchor in the chasm. It's always going to be for you a way that you can retrieve yourself out of these projections. Now, if someone wants to demystify this entire thing and say, okay, well, what are we really talking about here? If you notice in the Kabbalah and many of the traditions, they talk about how the monad, which is supposed to be the chief god, not a male, but we'll give it to him for that. Okay, so the chief god, whatever, the monad, splits itself into a duad, and then meaning it actually divides itself. And then this is how the process begins of world being created. Now, of course, they leave that as this guy who Santa Claus is a central character in the theme, who's basically a monad, first splits himself and then tripleizes himself or itself and then starts creating from there, right? So this is what they tell you. Now, of course, this is all central and relevant to us. So when you try to decode that and say, well, how does that relate to me? It relates to you as such. Notice how if you're talking to yourself in your mind, who's listening? Meaning that if that's you talking, then who is listening? So, of course, some people will try to go too deep into it with that shaitan. Or, they'll go into, that's this other being. And, maybe that's the mind itself. And, they'll go into this whole thing. But, see, I like to diffuse all of any kind of blame on something else by just saying all is self. Because it truly is. And the longer that it takes us to figure that out is as long as we'll be here. So the truth is that we know how to talk to ourselves and answer. And this is important to realize, because that means that, so what they're saying is that, so when you were in this all-perfected state, there could be actually nothing greater than where you were, then there was a thought, that old Ibis, that maybe there was something better than this. Maybe there is another place, right? And how that's encased in the Judeo-istic tradition is, of course, with the whole Lucifer idea of creating another being, and then God supposedly tell Lucifer, well, the whole thing is perfect, Lucifer, so the only thing that you're actually going to create is something imperfect. And then Lucifer goes, oh, no, I can make it better, and then all of a sudden the known world exists with all the sin and all that crazy stuff. So that's how they put it. But what they're really saying is that, so when we started thinking to ourselves from our all-knowing state, which you can do in meditation, meaning that you can be in these meditations when you know how to meditate, and you start letting go. So you start basically asking questions, stop letting your mind work, right? And then all of a sudden you start connecting into this field that's just overwhelming with energy. But the moment that you start thinking, oh my goodness, this is crazy, is the moment that you start grounding yourself again and landing back into this reality, right? Because what's actually happening is that you're oscillating between the only two spaces that exist. The one where there's no thinking. So the longer that you can sit there, the longer you absorb just nothing but spirit and energy, and you regenerate your entire vessel. But the moment that you start thinking, man, did I just see something? Or, man, I wonder if I'm doing this right. I wonder if I need to go tomorrow and pick up them. So if you don't have a mind that is capable of not using thought, then it is very difficult to enter into this much more grander space. But this sheer action is the parallel of us coming into realization of actually how we came into realization, meaning how we come into worlds, is we do it from going from this all-knowing state to starting to think. And because we're so powerful that anything we think starts to happen, we literally can plunge ourselves into the projection. Narcissus literally dives into the ocean of his own reflection. And we know that this is happening because this is what we're doing in the dream. Like if a person was saying, well, brother, I like what you're saying, but I don't really see where these kind of faculties are really being used every single day in our daily lives. Well, yes, they are. Because when you can sit down, start going to sleep, and then anything that you maybe were thinking about earlier that day or certain things that may have put an impression upon you, then all of a sudden you start seeing it in the dream, and then it just keeps going from there. Like it builds a snuffleupagus onto it. And that's just showing you that your mind has this ability to run out there and create the path before you start walking on it. And the reality that we're, quote-unquote, standing on right now is one of them. And the reason why it's so solid is because we believe in it. And then others around us, which is called a point-to-point system, they believe in it too, which makes it, with their prism, they make it more solid. They're basically taking in the light, which is the only code or the language, the carrier of the language. They're taking in the light, and then they're translating that light, which is called a reflection. And then they're making that reflection coalesce, meaning it's getting solid. And then it becomes for you, oh, this is some weed, or this is a cup, and this is a video recorder. I mean, this is what's happening. And so that's, again, this is an introduction to what we're talking about here. And I wanted to desist for a moment on just the knowledge and let people know. Now, this stuff is very real. Like I could do all sorts of things. I have different trades. I didn't come into this broke. Like I don't need something beside me to wake up. And because of that, that's how I came into this level of knowledge. But I'm not that kind of person that's just going to sit down on a tangent just because a lot of people are around me or want to talk to me and they like me now because of it, and I'm just going to stay stuck on something because of that. Now, you got people like that they'll stop their own spiritual progress in order to basically sit there and bask in the glow of everyone else's appreciation and then miss the mark. What to me, when a lot of people are around you and they're telling you you're doing great, I start just looking at how much time am I wasting, especially if I haven't actually finished building the projection. So what I'm working to drive home here to those that are listening is to realize this: the reason why I'm here talking to you is because of something very unique. This uniqueness you actually have and you can do. It's been tried and tested by yours truly. There's 7 years of you being able to follow along. If you don't trust, follow along with how I started gradually coming to this process or this point in my whole spiritual progress on the path. The path doesn't mean one step. It means a lot of steps. So, of course, in the beginning, I was dual, meaning that I was into duality. I battled gods, meaning all these gods from these different traditions. I went and sought out who exactly they were and started working as much as I could to nullify their existence on the realm because I had already peeped that they were nefarious, meaning that there are parasitic eidolons. Eidolons are just ideas. But see, ideas are powerful. We're now starting to realize that ideas are actually maybe one of the most powerful things, that actually stuff starts with ideas first, not as physical objects first. So when a lot of people believe in something and believe in an idea, it starts to become solid. It starts to think for itself. And this is what actually gods are in religious structures, that they can actually become eidolons. And there are certain people that know how to channel the energy from those eidolons. So the entire Paphic tradition, which of course is the Jesuits and the Catholics, They know how to channel the energies that come from Deuce Pater and come from the names that they've created within that tradition and siphon that energy off of the people who believe in that. You see, because that's spiritual mechanics. You see, I call that celestial mechanics, meaning that's working with the higher laws of energy to understand how to manipulate energy. But see, here's the thing. There's no scarcity. So in the reality, we're constantly taught that we're running out. So we're running out of oil. We only have so much money. Then there's this whole scarcity thing that begins, but it starts with gravity. It starts with ideas like time. It starts with things like death, because that's when a person first starts gaining this false knowledge that something is going to be over soon and that they need to be afraid of that. You see? So the reality, it powers itself on that fear. It's combustion. It's known as the pentagram, which is a phi-based symbol, fire versus wood versus water, and all that conflict actually generates energy, like what you're seeing in an engine. And that's why I say, hey, that's why Earth is God's footstool. And it's because it's basically a throne. And the throne keeps moving as long as people are still in conflict about what exactly is going on here. They're perpetuating the idea of someone else's reign and someone else's dominion. And then in these realities, the strongest mind wins. So this means that if you don't have a very strong personality, or you don't know much of this stuff, because these are your anchor points. Your ancestral knowledge is your anchor point. So if you don't have much stability, then when a much stronger mind comes along that can actually project an entire reality around you, this is what Immortal Charlemagne and these kind of characters that built the Christian tradition were capable of doing. Alexander the Great, Old Dual Quarnain, Old Two-Horn. So all these entities were actually were just more graduated forms of men. Some of them are chimeras, but they were capable of using their minds to envelop entire tribes. See, there was times, and you can even read it in some of these books from archaeological works, where they would stumble upon a tribe, and the entire tribe was being controlled by one man in the tribe. And they would call him the chief or the leader. They'd be bowing down to him and controlling them, and he would be using this power that he had gained over projections. And, of course, that's known as sorcery. So I wouldn't also tell you that the Kemetic Empire was devoid of that, because it was not. There were certain Nusut-Bitis, pharaohs, that used the power of projection, especially through gold. And that's where alchemy comes in. Again, this is a short tangent, but to understand the relationship between us and gold is to realize that gold is the highest conductor, and it conducts throughout the cosmos. So wherever gold is in the cosmos, it has the same frequency as gold in other places. So what they had done through alchemy, which is alchem, the knowledge of black, basically this is black knowledge is what it's being said, the knowledge that is normally hidden. Through that, the transmutations of metals could take place, primarily gold. So they could transmute gold from being something that you would just see as your necklace or your chain to something that you could actually consume. It would then become powder form when it was put in monatomic form. And then once it was put in its original form, which is an atomic structure, when it was ingested, it will put the person into their original form or their atomic structure. And then they would become so infinitely small, they would be also infinitely powerful. Powerful is not big, actually. Powerful is a quirk. It's so small that it passes through the pores of the membranes of realities that people create with their minds, meaning that this way of being makes you so small that you can pass right through the envelope of realities and then see exactly how they're constructed without even being detected, because you're so small. So these are things that, it may be a little bit of tangent, so I'm going to desist here for a moment, but just to let the audience know the range of what we're talking about here, meaning that, see, I work for this night and day. I toil for this night and day, because at the end of the day, this is going to be about me. This is going to be about my soul. And the first thing that I can do for everyone else is to do the best that I can for myself. And then once I do the best that I can for myself, since all is self, then I've done the best that I can for everyone else. Now, but if I'm still faking and I'm still waiting on the last judgment from a person who doesn't even know themselves, then I'll just be caught in the same web that they're caught in. And what I mean by that is a lot of times in this reality right now, we're basing everything about who we are on someone else's judgment. And we don't even know ourselves, and they don't know themselves. So how can these judgments actually even be correct? But yet when someone says, hey, you're ugly, or you're not smart, or you can't do this, then we sit there and we start to believe them. And then this is the buffoonery. That's how the system Because remember, back in the Prussian days, when they started looking at how they can control entire societies, they started realizing that the only system that could really be created that can do something like that, especially with the advent of population growth, would be if the people start policing each other. And so now you have this point-to-point system where you literally have someone confirming to you death, meaning you have people around you trying to build more energy into who you may think that you are, telling you things that are not even true. You know, you have all that going on. And again, this stuff is done in a quote-unquote harmless way, meaning people are not doing this necessarily, most aren't, on purpose to hold the other person back. They're just doing it naturally, which makes it far more dangerous because it's like then a beautiful lie. Then you don't even realize what the hell is going on until you're looking up in the face of your own projection, which becomes a nightmare because you're using components to build with that are only components of destruction.